Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan with Sage Dynamics. In this video we're going to talk about 90% shooting. Immediate disclaimer, that's not a hard 90% because some people are going to do quick math when I show the examples I'm going to do in this video. Basically, I'm out on the range just doing my own personal practice, and something I talk about a lot in classes, especially as we start working on uncomfortable things that shooters are uncomfortable with because they just don't work on them enough. That's not you, that's everybody, myself included. I like to pick examples of things that are a little less likely, because I'm a self-defense focused instructor, so a lot of the instructing that I do, a lot of the targets that I choose, a lot of the standards I try to introduce are self-defense focused, which I think they should be, without getting into the fantastical nature of combat shooting or scenario-based shooting as a default methodology for skill development. Some people, they say 3 yards, 3 rounds, 3 seconds, and those people are maybe right, probably wrong, and if they can predict the future, they should be buying lottery tickets, not worrying about gunfights, because if you could predict the future, you could just avoid the gunfight and go pick up your lottery ticket. But I digress. What I am talking about is putting performance walls in front of yourself. Probably about 10 years ago, I wrote an article on this. It was pretty controversial, basically saying that, and this was me talking to instructors, not to students, saying, hey, don't give declaratives. Don't be like, well, you can't do this, or you shouldn't do that, or you won't be able to do this, without first measuring the student's actual skill ability. Something I try to do as an instructor is not assume a student's skill level until they start to demonstrate what they're capable of. On the other side of that, I have to be able to measure and introduce some kind of objective, or as objective as possible, standard. When you practice on your own, you usually work on stuff you're already good at or stuff you're at least comfortable with. So it's hard to exceed. Unless you're shooting someone else's standards or someone else's drills, it's hard to know where you're going. And some shooters, let's be honest, it may not be you, but it might be somebody you know, they pick the easy way out and say things like combat accuracy, or they choose targets that have very large, luxurious scoring zones instead of holding themselves to standards. Now, the other side of the coin, there are people who use B8s as a personality, and that's all they talk about and that's all they shoot. Don't get me wrong, I'm a huge B8 fan. I was just shooting some today, but there are other things to do and other things that we need to be concerned with. Because accuracy is arbitrary, and what I mean by arbitrary is different standards. That's why there's 10,000 different targets. In fact, I've done a specific video on this you can check out on the channel for target selection. Because we can't agree on accuracy, and we can't agree on distance, and we can't agree on what target, what time we should be able to complete this accuracy at this distance, we end up in a very subjective neighborhood. So in this video, I just want to talk about how I approach what I call 90% shooting, which is, it applies to all shooting at all distances, but I'm going to use 2 examples. It doesn't matter what gun you're using. In this video, I'm going to be using 2 different guns. My Chambers Custom super high-speed, hand-fit, handmade 2011 or 2019. And I'll also be using a bone stock FN 509 LE. It doesn't matter what the gun is, whatever you want to use. I shoot 2011s, I shoot double stack 1911s, whatever you want to call them. And I also shoot FNs, I shoot Glocks, I shoot agency arms, I shoot a couple different guns. Not a huge variety, but a big variety. Big but huge. You get what I'm saying. I'm pretty boring otherwise. I'm not a big collector, but that's beside the point. So for this video, it doesn't really matter what gun I'm shooting, because the gun is only going to help marginally, and even that's arguable depending on what standard we're shooting. But I'm going to pick 2 things that people are universally uncomfortable with: distance shooting and one-hand shooting. First up, distance shooting, I'm just going to shoot at my ideal accuracy standard from 25 yards, which is a 4x6 A zone inside an 8.5x11 B zone, or what some people might call a C zone. This is my default standard for practical accuracy in all courses, even though there are some portions of classes at certain distances where a greater degree of accuracy is required. This is the standard. You have to be able to consistently hit this 4x6 box at the distances we're going to shoot. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce a standard, very generic 25-yard standard, which is 10 rounds from the holster in 20 seconds. Very B8-esque for some people. I think that's completely achievable. And this is where people start to get into their own head, and where we start to break down what we're actually doing with the gun, because my first rep, what I'll show you is taking the maximum amount of time. So here is that 10 rounds, 20 seconds, 25 yards, trying to achieve 10 out of 10 taking all the time I need to achieve 10 out of 10 in that 4x6 box. .14 seconds. Not bad. I really used my time. Here's the thing though. I wasted a bunch of sight pictures. If you watch the gun shoot, bang, it settles. I marinate. I see my dot. My dot's in the neighborhood it needs to be in. If, in this case, I'm using a red dot. You may be using iron sights. And then eventually I get around to pulling the trigger again. My split times were measured in seconds. So I was letting sight pictures, usable sight pictures, go away. Now there may have been some small adjustments that needed to take place, or some pressure relationship issues that needed to be adjusted, things like that. So we have to account for that too. But I definitely wasted time, and I wasted time because I had it in my head, I've got to get 10 out of 10. I got to get 10 out of 10. I got to get 10 out of 10. I got to get 10 out of 10. I'm a self-defense focused instructor. What happens if I say I'm going to try to get a 10 out of 10 and I'm going to push myself and I'm going to use every available sight picture? So here's the other side of the coin. I am literally going to pull the trigger every time I have a sight picture. If my sight picture is in the neighborhood, if it's transecting, covering, eclipsing, if it's in any way touching that 4x6 box, I'm going to be pulling the trigger. So here is what I call 90% shooting. .82 seconds, and I got 8 out of 10 rounds inside my 4x6 box. Let's really break that down. Now here's the thing, if the standard was 10 out of 10, then obviously when I shot it in 5.82 I failed because I dropped 2 rounds. But that wasn't necessarily the standard. The standard was 10 rounds, 4x6 box. Here I wanted to get 10 out of 10. So if I shoot it 7 times, 10 times, 15 times in a row, am I always going to get 10 out of 10 taking the maximum amount of time? Probably not, because I have impulse variability. I'm a human being. I make mistakes. This is what I get when I make mistakes while using my maximum fundamentals and utilizing every available sight picture I have. This is almost like a textbook difference for me, because even though the group here is much wider, and that's noticeable, there's 8 rounds inside that 4x6 box, but the group is not nearly as consistent. Who cares if the goal was the 4x6 box? One of my mantras is, if I want to shoot a tighter group, I'll shoot a smaller target. From 25 yards, a lot of people being able to hit the 4x6 box, that's the achievement. The group inside the box is just a bonus. That makes sense? So yes, I dropped around here, and I dropped around here. Both of those were grip torque related issues. Grip pressure wasn't quite equalized as the gun was settling. There was a little steerage involved, and there was just the human factor. Have I shot? And I have shot. I've shot 10 out of 10 in about 6 seconds from 25 yards. Unfortunately, it's like a fish story. I don't got it on video, so it didn't happen. But I did 8 out of 10. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm also very happy with this, and here's the rub. I didn't get here 5.82 seconds without first consistently doing this. So you have to pay your dues in regards to respecting the fundamentals. But eventually, you start to realize that you're wasting time. You're not utilizing every possible sight picture. And when I say sight picture, I don't mean just the visual aspect. I mean everything is tied together. The sight picture is stable because all the other fundamentals are helping it be that way. From 25 yards, recoil management isn't nearly as important as stability, unless you shoot fast. So when I was shooting that 5.82 pace, this dot was still in motion, but it was inside my A zone, and I just sent it. The differentiation between the two techniques is as simple as utilizing the maximum amount of sight pictures possible, knowing that fundamentals have been developed. So what I'm talking about when I say 90% shooting is, I want to shoot this and know what that's like. I want to know this is my rock solid, almost every single time I can get 10 out of 10. And then I want to shoot faster than I think I can to see what happens. My actual appreciable, repeatable speed at a comfortable pace is probably somewhere between these 2 times. So when I just shoot this with really no mind to achieving the par time or going super fast, I usually shoot it in about 8 to 10 seconds. And I'll do 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10, sometimes 8 or 7 out of 10. You know, it happens. But this is my two-handed, my 25 yards. No other conditions are present except for just pull the gun, shoot the gun, and try to achieve 10 rounds in the A zone in under the par time. If I'm not willing to accept the occasional round outside of the box, then I'm probably not going to get to the point where I can shoot 8 out of 10 at any rate of speed. And I'm just using myself as an example. Your example may vary, your standards may vary. But you have to be willing to fail, and don't see failure as, I got to go back to the basics. Because some people would shoot this, and they'd immediately go back to shooting this pace, and that's wrong. If you try to shoot this and you get 4 out of 5 or I'm sorry, if you get 4 out of 10 or 5 out of 10, slow down a little. Or try it 5 times in a row. Maybe do the average. Come up with an aggregate score if you really want to break down the math. Point is, when you fail, don't go back to basics. When you fail, don't go back to the beginning. Go back to your last appreciable speed of performance. So my somewhere in the middle speed is right around 8 or 9 seconds. If I start screwing up trying to go fast, if fast is my goal, I'm going to go back to that cutting it in half pace. That's my goal. Now, this, of course, is the example of 25 yards two-handed shooting. There's a bunch of different examples out there. Let's take a look at another thing people tend to be uncomfortable with, which is one-handed shooting. So one-handed shooting's pretty intimidating, mainly because you're only using one hand. If it's primary hand only, the one distinct advantage you have is that's normally the controlling hand, and something people don't think about a lot. Is that's the hand that always takes the recoil. Even when you're shooting two-handed, that primary hand, that's the linear, that's taking the recoil. So shooting primary hand only, usually a little bit more familiar, more comfortable than shooting support hand only. That being said, still not super easy. For this, I just chose 15 yards, same target, 10 rounds. I didn't really think of, and at least for the video, I didn't really think of like, hey, let me do this in a set amount of time. But I usually give myself a maximum of 15 seconds. Again, very subjective for my distance, my type of shooting. Primary hand, support hand only, I usually give them about the same time if I'm breaking it down just to skill. If I'm adding in draw strokes and other things like that, you got to play with the time limits a little bit. But on my first run, I wanted to maximize my time. So even though I didn't set a hard par time, I'm still thinking, okay, let me take my time, use that nebulous concept of patience, 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 patience. So just like with the 25-yard shooting, two-handed, whatever, I'm still wasting sight pictures. But some people's belief is if I take more time, I'll get better accuracy. So here's a look at that maximizing my time, and we'll see what the final verdict is. So I ended up with 9 out of 10 rounds. Now, of course, I could have filmed this 19 times in order to get 10 out of 10, but that's not the point of the video. I'm showing you guys kind of what I'm doing and where I'm at with the respective skill set. So I'm not refilming over and over and over and over and over again to try to get the ideal position. Even maximizing my time, I still only shot 9 out of 10 rounds, and I'm getting real close up to that 15-second, admittedly arbitrary par time. Now, when I think about the other side of the equation, just like we did with two-handed shooting from 25, that 90% shooting, what happens when I use every available sight picture? Here's what that ends up looking like. Just over 9 seconds. Just over 9 seconds, and I got the same score, 9 out of 10 rounds. So this is kind of, I don't want to say like a textbook proof of concept, but it really shows that even when you take your time, you're not necessarily improving your odds. What you're doing is you're allowing your sight picture to dwell. And a dwelling sight picture is not necessarily beneficial depending on what you're trying to do. Also, my grip doesn't need that extra amount of time to return to ideal position. The trigger doesn't need that amount of time to return to ideal position. The pressure relationship, if it's there, it's immediately ready to go again. And I use my sight picture be it red dot or iron sights, as my speedometer. As soon as it settles and it's covering an area where I'd be okay with a hit, I'm going to go ahead and send that next round. That is what I'm going to practice doing until I become proficient at it, because otherwise I'm literally wasting time. So I want to be a 90% shooter. So if I fire 100 rounds and I get 10 rounds that miss, that's 90% shooting if you want to break it down to the hard math. But what I really mean when I say 90% shooting is own your misses, but be okay with them. You're going to miss. If you have the tight shot group mentality, you may not become a better shooter. You may not grow your skill set. You may not become comfortable shooting beyond 7, 10, 15 yards. And I understand that for self-defense shooting, and I already said in the beginning of this video, I'm a self-defense focused instructor. I understand that I said, hey, you know, most likely to least likely. You want to work on those skills. These are less likely skills. They're still very possible. I'm a very self-defense focused instructor, so it's less likely for me, and I'll admit, for someone, or for me or someone else, to have a self-defense shooting at these greater distances. And when they do happen, people will not shut up about it because it's so rare. So not too long ago, as filming this video, there was an active killer in a mall in Indiana, and a gentleman stopped him at over 40 yards with a handgun. And then there were drills everywhere. And a lot of us in the instructor community were like, you guys weren't shooting that far before? Okay, cool. And there's nothing wrong with that, except there is. If you're already accomplished at 25 yards, you should be pushing it further and further and further back. If you're good at 3 yards, how many rounds do you really need to spend there when you go to the range? If you're good at 10 yards, how many rounds do you really need to spend there when you go to the range? Work on maintenance, that's fine. A couple rounds here, a couple rounds there, maybe run a few of your favorite drills, and then start focusing on things that you're not good at, things you're uncomfortable with, and shoot them to 90%. If you're doing that, you're going to see what you can accomplish and how to maximize how much time you have. So when it comes to those objective metrics, time, distance, accuracy, you're maximizing your ability to perform the task as efficiently as possible in the distance that you have in order to hit as accurately as possible. I'm Eric Count with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.